They started calling her Damaged before they ever learned her name. By the time Emma reached the edge of Pine Hollow, her boots were split at the seams, her skirt was torn at the hem, and her knuckles were raw from where she'd punched a wagon wheel in frustration miles back on the trail. A thin line of dried blood traced from her hairline down past her eyebrow where a bruise was already blooming purple. The late autumn wind cut straight through her threadbare shawl, turning her breath into ghosts in the cold air. She paused under the crooked town sign, willing her legs not to shake. Pine Hollow wasn't much. A single muddy street, a lopsided church, a general store, a saloon with its windows half-fogged from pipe smoke. But to Emma, after days of walking and nights of sleeping in ditches, it looked like one thing: a place where she might not die. The first eyes found her as she stepped onto the boardwalk. A woman sweeping her porch slowed, brush hanging midair. Two men unloading sacks of feed from a wagon stopped talking, their gaze sliding over Emma like she was a broken chair left in the road. One of them let out a low whistle. "Look at that one," he muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. "Somebody's cast-off, sure as sunrise." The other snorted. "She's damaged, that's what she is. You can see it from here." Damaged. The word hit her like a physical thing. Not because it was new, but because it was the same word she'd heard whispered in 3 towns behind her, from people who had no idea what she'd escaped. They didn't know about the man whose temper stained everything he touched. They didn't know about the night she'd climbed out the back window with nothing but a bag and a heartbeat that sounded like a gunshot in her ears. They didn't know any of it, but still they judged. Emma kept her eyes down and walked toward the general store. If she could just find work, any work, she could stay ahead of the past a little longer. Her fingers trembled as she pushed the door open, a bell jingling weakly overhead. Inside, the air smelled of dust and molasses. Shelves lined the walls: flour, beans, cheap cloth, tools. Behind the counter stood a man with thin lips and a thinner patience. He looked her over once, taking in the torn hem, the bruise, the way she stood like she was ready to flinch. "We don't do charity," he said before she could speak. "I'm not asking for charity," Emma replied, her voice soft but steady. "I'm asking for work. I can clean, keep books, mend." "Don't need help," he cut in. "And I sure don't need trouble. Last thing I want is some damaged stray crying in my storeroom." Heat stung her eyes, but she swallowed it down. Crying never helped. Crying had only ever made things worse. She nodded once, turned, and stepped back out into the cold. Laughter drifted from the saloon next door, hard, brittle laughter that made the hair on her arms rise. She wasn't desperate enough for that. Not yet. Not again. She was halfway down the steps when she felt it, that prickling awareness of being watched. Not the usual careless stare, but something heavier. She looked up. At the far end of the street, beside a stack of cut lumber, a man stood with his hands resting lightly on a wheelbarrow handle. Tall, broad-shouldered beneath a worn wool coat, beard flecked with gray. His hat brim shadowed most of his face, but not his eyes. They were pale and steady, fixed on her in a way that made her feel seen, not sized up. Behind her, someone muttered, "There goes that damaged girl." The man by the lumber shifted his jaw, his gaze never leaving her. For the first time since she'd run, Emma had the unsettling thought that maybe, just maybe, someone in this town was about to disagree. Emma turned away from the man near the lumberyard, telling herself she didn't have the strength to deal with another stranger's curiosity. But as she stepped off the boardwalk, her knees wobbled again, a dull wave of dizziness rolling through her. She forced a breath, straightened her shoulders, and kept walking. She'd learned how to move even when her body begged her to stop. Survival required nothing less. But Pine Hollow had its eyes on her now, and not kindly. 2 young cowhands leaned against the water trough, boots muddy, grins sharp. "Hey there, sweetheart," one called. "You lookin' for company? We ain't picky." Emma didn't break stride. Ignoring men like them had become second nature. Damaged goods, the other said louder. Maybe that's why she's walking alone. Her breath hitched, but her pace didn't falter. She'd been called worse. She'd survived worse. Words couldn't bruise skin, not the way fists did. She focused on the road exiting town, already preparing to face the miles ahead. But then a shadow moved beside her. A quiet, grounded presence. The man from the lumberyard had stepped into her path. Up close, he was even larger than she'd realized. Broad enough that she felt small standing before him, but not in a frightening way. His presence wasn't loud, wasn't demanding. It was solid, like a mountain she didn't have to climb. "You're hurt," he said calmly, his voice deep enough to feel rather than hear. Emma stiffened. "I'm fine. You're bleeding." She touched the side of her face. Her fingers came away red. She hadn't even felt it. The cowhands snickered from behind her. "She's always hurt. Ain't nothing left in her worth fixing." Something in the man's expression hardened. Barely, but enough that the air seemed to drop a degree. He turned his head slightly, just enough to look at the men behind her. "That's enough," he said. No shout, no threat, just a quiet order from someone who didn't need volume to be obeyed. The cowhands' smirks faltered. One pushed off the trough with a shrug. "Relax, Cade. We was just talking." "Then talk about something else," he replied. They muttered but didn't linger. The moment they backed off, Emma understood. This man wasn't feared because he was violent. He was respected because even violence listened to him. He looked back at her. "Name's Elias Cade." Emma hesitated. She hadn't spoken her name aloud in days, maybe weeks. "Emma," she finally said. Elias nodded once. "You on your way somewhere, Emma?" "Yes." "Where?" She swallowed. "Anywhere but here." He studied her a moment. Not the way other men did, hunting weakness or opportunity. He looked at her like he was assembling pieces of a puzzle he already half understood. "You got money for travel?" he asked. She shook her head. "Food." Another shake. "A coat thick enough for the weather that's comin'?" She clutched her thin shawl tighter but didn't speak. Her silence answered for her. He exhaled slowly, not frustrated, just accepting a truth he'd already expected. "Town doesn't take kindly to strangers," he said. "Especially not ones who look like they've fought hell and made it out." Emma felt her throat tighten. "They think I'm damaged." Elias' gaze didn't waver. "You look like someone who survived something that tried to break you." Her breath stilled. No one had ever said it like that. Then, quietly, so quietly she almost missed it, he added, "That doesn't make you damaged. That makes you mine to protect as long as you're in this town." Emma blinked, stunned. "I don't even know you." "You don't have to," he said simply. "You just have to let someone help you for once." And with the weight of the past heavy on her shoulders, Emma realized she hadn't heard an offer like that in years. Maybe ever. "You said." Elias didn't touch her. He didn't reach for her arm or guide her the way most men did when they took it upon themselves to help. He simply walked beside her, matching her unsteady pace as though he had all the time in the world. Emma wasn't used to that, gentleness without agenda. It unsettled her more than cruelty ever had, because cruelty she could predict. Kindness, that was a foreign land filled with its own dangers. "Come on," he said softly as they reached the end of the street. "Let's get you out of sight before someone else gets an opinion." She almost smiled at that, almost. Instead she nodded and followed him down the narrow path behind the blacksmith's shop. Smoke drifted from the forge, carrying the sharp scent of iron. Every few steps her ribs protested, sending sparks of pain through her chest. Elias noticed her flinch but didn't comment until they were well away from town eyes. "Sit," he said, motioning to an overturned crate near the back of the forge. Emma didn't argue. Her legs were trembling too hard. As she lowered herself, Elias crouched a few feet away, not looming, not crowding, just close enough to see the cut on her face. "You need this cleaned," he murmured, pulling a small cloth from his coat pocket. She tensed, her entire body tightening like a trap snapping shut. "No, I can do it myself." He didn't insist. He didn't push. He simply set the cloth beside her and leaned back on his heels. "Then do it when you're ready." That stunned her more than any demand would have. Every man before Elias had taken what he wanted, her space, her breath, her choices. Elias gave them back to her piece by piece, and she didn't know what to do with the unexpected freedom. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she lifted the cloth to her cheek. The sting made her gasp. "That bad?" he asked quietly. Emma nodded, blinking against the burn. Ribs hurt too. Her eyes shot up in surprise. "How did you?" "I know what pain looks like, and I know what it looks like when someone's trying to hide it." Emma's pulse stumbled. He wasn't guessing. He was remembering, and that meant he had his own scars tucked behind that quiet voice and steady gaze. The realization softened something inside her. Just a little. "I'll be fine," she whispered. "Being fine ain't the same as being safe." She looked down, twisting the cloth in her hands. "I've never been either." Elias didn't respond right away. He just watched her with that unreadable calm that seemed carved from stone and storm simultaneously. When he finally spoke, the words were so simple she almost missed the weight they carried. "You can be both, just not alone." Emma swallowed hard, the truth of it hitting her like cold water. She wanted to refuse him, to insist she didn't need anyone. But her voice betrayed her when she asked, barely audible, "Why do you care?" Elias shook his head slowly. "Because I've seen what happens in this town when nobody steps in. And I won't watch it happen again." She studied him, searching for hidden motives, but found none. Just a man who had lived long enough to recognize a soul on the edge. Finally she whispered, "I don't know how to trust anyone anymore." "You don't have to trust me today," he said gently. "You just have to walk with me." He rose, offering no hand, no push, just the space for her to stand when she was ready. And for the first time in a long time, Emma stood not because she had to, but because someone believed she could. Elias led her through a narrow trail behind the blacksmith's shop, the path winding toward the quieter edge of Pine Hollow. The noise of the town faded behind them. Laughter, gossip, the cruel ease with which people spoke about lives they didn't understand. The farther they walked, the more Emma felt her lungs loosen, though each breath still carried a flicker of fear. She had learned the hard way that silence could be a warning just as easily as a refuge. They reached the back of the livery barn, where a wide fence overlooked the creek. Water trickled over the rocks, soft and steady, the kind of sound that reminded Emma of childhood, a time before anyone had tried to own her or break her into something smaller. She stopped near the fence post, gripping the wood to steady herself. Elias noticed but didn't mention it. His restraint alone felt like an act of kindness. "You walked a long way to get here," he said quietly, leaning against the fence. "Anyone after you?" Emma's fingers tightened. "I don't know," she answered, "but I left without permission. Men like that, they don't take kindly to being left." Elias didn't ask who they were, didn't push for names. Instead, he studied the treeline as if expecting danger to step out at any moment. "If someone's hunting you," he said, "they'll regret choosing this town as their battleground." It should have comforted her, but instead her chest tightened. "Don't say that. I don't want you getting involved." "I already am," he replied, his voice low but calm. "The second those boys called you damaged, I stepped in. I'm not stepping back now." Emma looked away, her eyes burning. "You don't even know what happened to me. You don't owe me your story to deserve safety." The words cracked something open inside her, something brittle that had been holding her together for too long. She exhaled shakily, and a tear she hadn't meant to shed slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. "I shouldn't be crying. It just, comes out sometimes. Elias turned toward her, expression gentle. Then let it. She had never been given permission to feel anything. Not tears. Not fear. Certainly not relief. His voice made it sound like she wasn't failing by needing a moment. She was surviving it. But the fragile peace shattered when the crunch of boots sounded behind them. Emma froze. Elias straightened instantly, his shoulders tightening beneath his coat. 3 men stepped into view. Dust-covered, mean-eyed, and far too familiar. Emma's breath left her in a single sharp gasp. Her past had found her. Well, well, the tallest drawled, eyes narrowing as he took in her bruised face. There's our runaway. Emma stumbled backward, grip slipping on the fence. Elias stepped in front of her without hesitation, his presence like a wall rising from the earth itself. That's far enough, he warned. The man smirked. She belongs to us. No, Elias said, voice cold and final. She doesn't. In that moment, Emma realized something terrifying and breathtaking all at once. This stranger, this mountain of a man, had decided to stand between her and everything that had broken her. And her past, which had always felt unstoppable, suddenly looked very small in comparison. The tallest man, Garin, took a slow step forward, boots crunching against the gravel. Emma flinched at the sound, her whole body recognizing him before her mind could catch up. Elias shifted slightly, his stance widening, blocking her fully behind him. He didn't reach for a weapon, didn't raise his fists, he simply stood, and somehow that alone felt like a warning. Well now, Garin drawled. Didn't think you'd manage to crawl this far, Emma. You gave us a real chase. Emma's breath trembled, but she forced words out. I'm not going back. You don't get to decide that. One of the others snapped, the wiry one with a scar across his jaw. You belong to Mr. Beckett. He paid good money for you. Ran off without permission? That's theft. Elias didn't turn, but Emma felt the air change around him. Temperature dropping, tension sharpening. She doesn't belong to anyone, he said, voice quiet but edged like a blade. Garin chuckled. You think you can claim her, mountain man? You don't know what she is. I know she's running from men who call her property, Elias replied evenly. That tells me everything I need. Scarjaw stepped closer, pointing at Emma over Elias's shoulder. Move aside. We ain't looking for trouble. We just want what's ours. Elias shifted, just a breath, just a subtle repositioning, but enough to place one foot in front of the other. A protective stance. A refusal solid enough to build a wall on. She's not yours, he said. And trouble's exactly what you brought. Emma pressed a hand to her ribs, fighting the urge to collapse. She had run so far, fought so hard, yet here they were, shadows from her past catching up. But this time, she wasn't alone. Garin spat in the dirt. You gonna fight 3 armed men over a broken thing? Emma's stomach twisted. Broken, damaged, worthless. The words clung to her like scars. But Elias didn't flinch. I'll fight you over a human being who deserves better than the likes of you. Scarjaw snorted. You sayin' she's something worth protectin'? No, Elias said, jaw tightening. Then he added, I'm saying she's someone worth protecting. Emma felt her heart lurch. No one had ever spoken about her like that. Not once. Not ever. The third man, the youngest, looked uneasy. Garin, maybe we should just... We ain't leaving without her. Garin roared, hand dropping to the handle of his revolver. Emma gasped. Elias! But Elias had already moved. In one fluid step, he placed himself even more firmly between her and the danger, coat shifting as his own hand hovered near his belt where a hatchet hung. Not drawn, just present. A statement. I won't warn you again, he said, voice low enough to make the air shiver. Turn around. Garin glared at Elias, then at Emma, then back again. She could see him calculating weights and risks shifting by the second. "You'll regret this," he finally spat. "Both of you." The three men backed away slowly, hatred burning in their eyes. When they disappeared behind the barn, Emma sagged against the fence, knees threatening to give out. Elias turned to her, his expression softening instantly. "You're safe." "No," she whispered. "Not yet. They'll come back." "Then let them," Elias said calmly. "Because next time, they'll learn what it means when I say someone is mine to protect." For the first time since she'd run, Emma felt the smallest spark of something she thought she'd lost forever. The belief that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't doomed to run alone anymore. Emma stayed leaning against the fence long after the men disappeared. Her breaths came shallow and uneven, each tremor in her chest a reminder that she had narrowly escaped being dragged back into the life she'd fought so desperately to flee. She didn't realize she was shaking until Elias placed his coat around her shoulders, the heavy wool swallowing her small frame. "You're all right," he murmured. Not a question, not a reassurance he didn't mean, just a steady truth he was anchoring her to. She pressed her hands against the coat, overwhelmed. "They're not going to stop," she whispered. "Garen, the others, they don't let things go. If they think they own something, they chase it until it breaks." Elias looked out toward the treeline, where the men had vanished. "Good thing you're not something," he said quietly. "You're someone, and you don't break. You endure." Emma let out a quiet, shaky laugh. "You say that like you know me. I know strength when I see it." He turned back to her. "And I know fear. You're carrying both. That's what surviving looks like." The words slipped into her like warm air into frozen lungs. For the first time in a long time, she didn't argue. She didn't try to convince him of her worthlessness. She just let the truth sit with her. When she straightened, pain shot up her ribcage. Elias saw it instantly. "You're hurt bad," he said. "Let me take you somewhere safe." "Nowhere is safe for me," she said softly. "There is," he replied, voice steady as stone. "My cabin, up in the North Ridge. Quiet, hard to reach, harder to find unless you know the land." She hesitated. "Elias, I can't ask you to risk that. I can't stay here. If they come back." "They will come back," he said simply. "And that's why you won't be here when they do." The finality in his voice stole the breath from her lungs. He wasn't asking. He was deciding, without controlling, without demanding, simply because he refused to watch harm come to someone who had already known too much of it. "But why?" she asked, her voice cracking at the edges. "Why would you do this for me? I'm not damaged," he finished for her. "That's what they called you." She swallowed hard. He shook his head once, firm and unyielding. "What I see is a woman who walked away from hell with her dignity still in her hands. That's not damaged. That's courage." Her lips trembled. "You don't even know my full story. You don't owe me your story," he said. "You only owe yourself a chance to live." Emma looked down at her hands, shaking, bruised, scarred, and for the first time, she didn't see evidence of what had been done to her. She saw evidence that she had survived it. Elias reached out, not touching her, but offering the space between his hand and hers. An invitation. "When you're ready," he said gently, "we'll leave." She nodded slowly. "I'm ready now." A small smile touched his lips. "Good. Because as long as you're with me, no man alive will lay a hand on you again." Emma stepped toward him, wrapped in his coat, her fear still present but no longer steering her. When they walked back through town, people stared, but this time not with mockery or dismissal. Something in Elias's stance, in the fierce calm of his expression, made even the cruelest tongues go silent. As they reached the edge of Pine Hollow, Emma glanced back once. Not in longing, not in regret, but in farewell. "They called you damaged," Elias said quietly beside her. "They were wrong." She exhaled, the weight of the past loosening its grip with each step away. "What do you call me?" she asked. Elias looked at her with steady certainty. Someone worth protecting. And for the first time since her world fell apart, Emma believed it.